Let's get to MJ Lee. She is on that campaign trail tonight in Wisconsin, the battleground state, just outside Milwaukee, which is where Harris is taking the stage later tonight. So, MJ, what is the latest you're learning from the Harris campaign tonight?
Well, Aaron, the Harris campaign continues to see this as a very close race where the outcome could really end up coming down to the margins in just a handful of states. But in these final days, we are starting to see some bullishness starting to creep in from the Harris campaign, particularly when it comes to the voters who have already voted, and specifically the voters who they say only recently made up their minds in a number of these battleground states. And in particular, campaign officials are pointing to some of the offensive and incendiary comments coming from Donald Trump and some of his surrogates, some of which you referred to in that intro there, and saying that undecided voters simply do not like what they're hearing. Now, if we are starting to see a little bit of those bursts of optimism from the Harris campaign, that does not mean, Aaron, that Vice President Kamala Harris herself is anywhere close to predicting victory. And in fact, we have new reporting that gives us a little bit of a window into her frame of mind in this final stretch. I'm told by multiple sources that one thing that the Vice President has been clear she will not discuss, even in private with her team, is the question of who might serve in a future Harris cabinet or administration. The Vice President herself has said, described herself as being a little bit superstitious, and I am told that superstition is definitely a bit at play here. That's not uncommon for politicians, but I do think all of this adds up to, I think, a picture of a campaign that is not willing to take anything for granted. And number one proof of that tonight is the fact that the Vice President is back in Wisconsin for the second time in 2 days. Aaron.
All right, MJ, thank you very much. And everyone's here with me now, this final Friday before Election Day. David Axelrod, you hear MJ saying, look, the campaign is, they're feeling good. And they believe that they are outperforming Trump specifically on those undecided voters in the final days, that they're messaging about a democracy and disqualifying. They feel that is working. Those undecided voters, they say, are they're going that way. If that's the case, and we know them to be 1 to 3% in these states, where if the polls are right, that's the margin of victory. That could be the race. Could be.
Yeah, it could be. I think the emphasis should be on could, because nobody really knows. And I think what they do sense, and what I sense, is that she's closing better than he is. This is the week when people who have not been very tuned into the race are going to finally pay attention to it because they have to. And Donald Trump is kind of off track, and she's got on her message. And in some ways, he's modeling the behavior that has caused people to be concerned about him in the first place. So I think they feel good about that. They look at early vote numbers in these blue wall states. They feel good about that. The gender composition of that early vote, registration in Wisconsin, you can register right up to Election Day, the registration. So they're looking at all of these things. But I don't talk to anybody who says, we got this thing. I just think they think that it is moving in a way that may be favorable to them.
So, Aaron, when you look at the polls, right, we just were going through a few of them, but Pennsylvania, one of them, where, again, margin of error, but she's on top in this Marist poll. 19-point shift there among independents. Harris now ahead of Trump 55 to 40. Now in September, Trump was actually ahead of Harris by 4 points. And that's a huge shift, right? That's 19 points. If that's accurate, it's obviously a huge deal, if it's accurate.
It is a big deal because that's a monumental shift in a very short amount of time. But what we're going to be seeing is Pennsylvania is the largest electoral get in these swing states right now. You're looking at 19 electoral votes there. So Pennsylvania will be very indicative, I think, of the blue wall states that you're going to see in the closing of the election. But what you're going to see is, especially around the Pittsburgh area, that Republicans are going to make a concerted effort to drive up in those counties just outside Washington and Brown to get the numbers up so that they can try and close that gap. They need to drive up. And we were talking about this a little bit before. The change in the electorate overall for Republicans means that a higher turnout election might actually be better for them because with so many low propensity voters, they're trying to swing into the Republican camp that while Democrats might be excited by early vote, Republicans are aiming for Election Day with less likely voters to try and swing the map. And that can count in any of these states.
Right, I guess that's true. And we know that, so far, Ashley, at least it seems a lot of voters who are used to voting, who vote in midterms, they are the ones who have been going out and early vote, at least what we've been hearing from the campaigns. In Pennsylvania, though, Ashley, since we're talking about it, Harris has turned to Shapiro, Josh Shapiro, the popular governor whom she did not pick to be her vice president, to put a closing ad in the state. Here's a part of it.
Do you want more chaos? Or like me, are you ready for some common sense? That's why I'm with Kamala. I've known her for 2 decades. She's practical, and she gets stuff done.
As president, I will chart a new way forward and find solutions to create jobs and bring down costs. I will fight for you and your family every day.
So, Ashley, what does that do in Pennsylvania? Does that help her because he is popular? He has been a governor who has governed in a bipartisan manner. Or does it remind people that they're sitting there in that picture and they're not going to be sitting there if she wins because she didn't pick him?
I don't think it does the latter. I think he's doing exactly what a surrogate for the campaign should be doing, and that's whatever the campaign asks. He's been on the trail with governors, the Democratic governors, on a bus tour, knocking doors, doing rallies, and now he's up on television. It's actually a unique way to close, but I think it's a clever way to close so you can reach as many people as possible. And it is a reminder that unlike Donald Trump, Kamala Harris has all the Democratic governors, all the former presidents that are Democratic and vice presidents supporting her, unlike her running mate. And so I think it's a good reminder for the state of Pennsylvania particularly.
So, David, can I ask about this Liz Cheney comment and not about what people have been talking all day of what he said and what he meant and all that business that happens with Trump comments? I don't mean that. I mean the fact that Trump has explained his comments now twice.
Yeah.
He posted on social media, and then he went out and said, and he wanted to say, I wasn't saying firing squad. I was saying she wasn't really.
Right.
He went out and did that.
Yes.
We all know that Trump doesn't usually do that. He doesn't.
Yeah.
Is that a sign that he feels weakness, that he feels that could
Well,
hurt
I
him?
think he was told this was not good. Listen, I keep thinking about what it would be like to be in that campaign headquarters, never knowing what my candidate is going to do that day. You're trying to drive a message about the economy or immigration, and he's out there and he's doing this. And that becomes the story. And there are only a few days left, and now a day is hijacked by that story. So, yeah, I think he's trying to clean up. But if you're cleaning up, you know, the old expression in politics, if you're explaining you're losing, he's doing lots of splaining.
And you've worked with it, right? You know. So what do you read into him now explaining this twice?
Well, it was interesting watching that tape back because the secondary set of remarks he made where he was explaining, that was loaded into the teleprompter. So there was a conversation, a broader conversation about moving those remarks for him. But listen, right now, I think to David's point earlier, now that Halloween's over, I think a lot of those persuadable voters, moms, people with families, they're now starting to tune in because we're in the final stretch going into Election Day. So I don't know that they are necessarily going to change their mind because of this comment. There's so much noise right now. Trump needs to stay focused. There was a bad jobs report today and two adjustments to the previous job reports to bring those numbers down.
Were bad.
They should be talking about the economy and hitting Kamala for this. Anything that's not doing that is detracting from their ability to try and win this election.
Ashley, how much insight do you think the Harris campaign has on the voters who are making their decision at the last moment as to whether they are people who simply don't pay attention or they are people who just actually do pay attention and do know what's going on and just haven't been able to decide what they're going to do about it? You know, how much do they really know about these individuals?
Well, I think this campaign is a little bit different in terms of what their knowledge is because of the short runway of her campaign. Voters who might have tuned in here or there in a June debate, well, it's not the candidate anymore. It's a new candidate, and maybe they missed the fall debate. So I think they know a couple of things. One, they are looking state by state on the early voting and the mail-in ballots and determining are these voters that have voted in a midterm election. And if they had, the likelihood is that they're going to probably vote Democratic if they have party ID in that state. They also probably are putting voters in two other buckets. People who are still making a decision and people, to David's point earlier, that are just now paying attention. And those individuals, they're going to be pushing those negative comments that Donald Trump seems to be making day after day multiple times a day. But then they're also going to be looking for low propensity voters. There still are a lot of folks that if they have never voted before, that if they go to the polls, they will vote. And we call those the knock and drags. You knock on the door and you drag them to the polls. So I think that they're looking at people in a couple different ways because of the consolidated timeline of her campaign.
David, bottom line, does this change the view out there that Trump has a ceiling? And the ceiling is the ceiling where he was in 2016 and 2020.
I think that's very much an open question, and he has to prove that it's not the case. And I think this makes it harder for him to surpass that ceiling. So yeah, I don't think Trump is finishing well. I said this before. Last week, I think he was in better shape than he is in this week. And you want to close strong in a presidential race.